attempt to kill Hitler. One man prepared to act to change the world. Colonel Klaus Graf von Stauffenberg.
He was a wonderful man. He was a very rare mixture. A great idealist with a cool, precise intellect. He was masterful in action. The attempt showed the world that there were Germans who weren't Nazis, who were prepared to stake their lives to overthrow this regime.
Who was this man?
When I was growing up, I never had to ask my parents, why didn't you do something? They showed that there were people in Germany with a conscience.
Berlin, 30th of January 1933. Hitler comes to power. The stormtroopers are on the march. The brown shirts parade in Bamberg too, where Stauffenberg's regiment is stationed. Stauffenberg has no particular objection to the Nazi takeover. This aristocratic officer watches Hitler's progress with interest.
As a person, he found Hitler rather dubious right from the beginning. But he took a wait-and-see attitude towards National Socialism itself. In the early years, he certainly wasn't any kind of opponent.
By 1933, Stauffenberg has been an army officer for 7 years. He's considered highly talented, and he receives rapid promotion. The Führer has plenty to offer the army. A return to military power after the shame of Germany's defeat in the Great War. 1933 is an important year in Stauffenberg's private life too. In September, after a 3-year engagement, he marries 20-year-old Lina von Lerchenfeld in Bamberg Cathedral.
My mother was head over heels in love. It was an absolute love match. I know that she was an incredibly happy young woman, and she worshipped her husband.
Stauffenberg said to his mother-in-law,
"For an officer, a wife is a necessary evil. No warrior should ever marry. But in peacetime, the need for a family must be satisfied."
But you have to understand that my father loved playing devil's advocate, and he particularly enjoyed provoking people.
A clever line, and typical Stauffenberg. But he told his bride he'd known from the first moment that she was the one. As newlyweds, they were by all accounts radiantly happy. Nina von Stauffenberg will stand by her husband, come what may.
She was so loyal to my father. And trusted him to an extent that young women today would probably not understand.
Klaus von Stauffenberg came from an old South German aristocratic family. Castle Lautlingen was the ancestral home. Klaus and his brothers spent much of their youth here. Their forefathers were chancellors and ministers to the kings of Württemberg.
His inner autonomy and independence, what you might call his nonchalance, was of course based on his consciousness of his family, of his heritage. But he was never condescending or arrogant towards others. Above all, this was a family that saw its role in the service of the state.
Noblesse oblige. No empty phrase for the Stauffenberg brothers. And a gentleman's education included an acquaintance with the arts. The brothers joined the intimate circle around the poet Stefan George. His work promoted a spiritual aristocracy, its ideal, the German High Middle Ages. Klaus idolized George.
He was sure that George was the most important German writer of the time. And his ideas of a new German empire with its elitist spirit always influenced and marked him.
Das hat ihn schon sehr beeinflusst und geprägt.
Nazi propaganda also used the Middle Ages in its vision of a better future for Germany. Perhaps it struck a chord with Stauffenberg.
At times he was a little uncertain about what the National Socialist movement represented. But at the same time, it would be impossible for him, I think, not to hope that perhaps Germany would find its saviour, that perhaps Hitler would allow Germany to achieve its destiny somehow in the 1930s.
But what Hitler wants is war. By September 1939, he has it. The German army invades Poland. Klaus von Stauffenberg is a supplies officer in the 1st Light Armored Division. Months before, he had warned a friend.
The fool's going to start a war.
There was no enthusiasm for war, none at all. We didn't know how it would go. There were too many unpredictables. And then came the famous Blitzkrieg. Of course, that was a big surprise. And then a colossal success. And people started saying, isn't it amazing what they've achieved?
But from the first day in Poland, Hitler has shown what he means by war. A brutal conflict of ideology.
Then came the persecution of the Jews. From the beginning of the campaign, the SS and the Gestapo went on the rampage through the occupied territories with appalling cruelty. Some of us not only knew what was going on, some people saw it with their own eyes.
And Stauffenberg? In November 1939, he visits his uncle, Count Uxküll, who confronts him with reports of atrocities. Uxküll has close contacts with the resistance against Hitler.
Man müsste Hitler verhaften und vor Gericht stellen.
He insists that total disaster can only be averted if Hitler is deposed and put on trial. He wants Klaus to take part in a coup d'etat.
Ich bin noch nicht so weit.
Stauffenberg says he's not ready.
Salvage coat red.
Summer 1940. Hitler's stunning victory over France silences his critics. Stauffenberg at the mobile headquarters of the 6th Panzer Division during the advance into France. This is Stauffenberg's victory too. Yet he doubts that Germany's victory can last.
How little is ever permanent. An abrupt change, or a complete reversal, is so much more likely than the current situation continuing. even for a few years.
In June 1941, the Wehrmacht attacks the Soviet Union. This too will be a blitzkrieg in the minds of Hitler and of his generals. 3 million German soldiers advance into Russia. Once the campaign starts, Stauffenberg wants above all to win this war. Winter brings the invasion to a disastrous halt before the gates of Moscow. A furious Hitler sacks most of the generals and makes himself army commander-in-chief. Behind the front, special units of the SS are continuing what they started in Poland on a massively increased scale. Stauffenberg is now attached to the general staff. What he learns there fills him with revulsion.
I'm sure he knew a great deal, even if he didn't know everything. But he hardly ever talked about it. Just occasionally when we got together in a small group.
Stauffenberg decorates his office with a picture so that anyone who enters will see the expression of madness in Hitler's eyes. He tells a fellow officer that Germany's conduct of the war is criminal.
The most important discussions were the ones we had in the evenings, when we could quite openly ask each other, what should we do with a man like this? Should we depose him as commander on the Eastern Front? Put him on trial? Lock him up? They were all suggestions that had only a tiny chance of becoming reality. We were perfectly aware of that.
The war continues, and with it the killing behind the lines. In August 1942, Stauffenberg tells a colleague,
"They're shooting Jews in their thousands. This must not be allowed to continue."
A month later in September, Stauffenberg can no longer contain his frustration.
Hitler is personally responsible. Nothing can be changed until he's eliminated. It's about time some officer took out his pistol and dispatched the grubby little man.
January 1943. The German 6th Army is surrounded at Stalingrad. Hitler has forbidden them to surrender. On the 25th of January, the Red Army launches its final assault on the beleaguered Wehrmacht forces. This battle is the beginning of the end. This much is obvious, even to Field Marshal von Manstein. Stauffenberg believes the moment has come to persuade Manstein to join the resistance. On the 26th of January 1943, he reports to Manstein's headquarters. He urges Manstein to join a coup against Hitler. Manstein refuses. He tells Stauffenberg to apply for a posting on the front line. Stauffenberg insists. Manstein says he will arrest Stauffenberg if this doesn't stop. In February 1943, Stauffenberg is transferred to the Afrika Corps at his own request. Things have become a little too hot for him in army headquarters. The 10th Panzer Division is withdrawing as the Allies advance.
The air superiority of the enemy was unimaginable. There were Spitfires everywhere.
7th of April, 1943.
The commander had warned Stauffenberg, "You haven't got a lot of experience of attacks by low-flying fighters, so watch out. I'll give you one piece of advice. Get out of the car, look which direction the plane is flying, and if it's aiming for you, then run."
Und wenn es die Richtung auf Sie selbst nimmt, dann weglaufen.
We got out of the car fast, and the shells were thudding into the sand beside us.
Klaus von Stauffenberg is seriously wounded. He loses his left eye, his right hand, and 2 fingers of his left hand.
I never again had a superior I would work for as willingly as Stauffenberg. That was a great loss for me.
It's almost a miracle he survived.
Papi, komm!
4 months later, at home in Lautlingen.
It was a while before we saw him. He was in hospital in Munich for months. And the first time I saw him was at my confirmation. Our first reaction was one of relief that he wasn't dead, because so many people had been killed.
Days of convalescence and reflection. Days of decision.
Stauffenberg clearly made up his mind the killing of Hitler had to be done. And he wanted to do this regardless of the fact that he had a family, he had a wife, he had children, he had people who depended on him. In the end, he had to say to himself, this is more important, the killing of Hitler.
Now, from autumn 1943, Stauffenberg meets regularly with other conspirators. He prepares a plan with Colonel Henning von Tresckow and General Friedrich Olbricht, not just to assassinate Hitler, but to overthrow the entire Nazi regime.
Reichsführung, SS, Personalstab, Prinz Albrechtstraße.
Operation Valkyrie will use the reserve army to take over all the centers of Nazi power.
The leading figures in the Third Reich would have to be arrested. The SS must be neutralized. You would have to occupy the radio stations. The concentration camps would have to be taken over, and so forth. Unbelievably difficult when you hardly have anyone. You can't put the job out to tender. Who's qualified to do it? Who wants to apply? You couldn't do that. The circle of the initiated was very small.
The Nazis will be attacked by their own forces. Operation Valkyrie is designed to crush an uprising against the regime. The plotters have turned it on its head. The reserve army is to neutralize the SS and the security service and seal off the government district. By the end of the day, the army should control the Reich. Yet success is not the decisive factor, according to Henning von Tresckow. The assassination must take place, whatever the cost. The essential point is not the practical aim, but that the German resistance dared to take the decisive gamble before the world and before history. 6th of June 1944. A gigantic Allied armada lands in Normandy. The conspirators plan to call for a ceasefire, at least in the West, once Hitler has been killed. The plans for the coup are in place. Stauffenberg carefully recruits further conspirators. One of them is Lieutenant Ewald von Kleist.
I really liked that. He came straight to the point with no beating about the bush. He showed me exactly what was planned. And then we discussed the individual details. The assassination attempt was so important for me because it meant so many people would live, because the war would be stopped. That was clear. As to the chances of success, I was very skeptical. It really was very difficult.
By now, Stauffenberg has been appointed Chief of Staff of the Reserve Army, the perfect position to launch Valkyrie, and it gives him direct access to Hitler.
Haben Sie das Material bekommen?
Conspirators provide him
Plastiksprengstoff?
with 2 kilos of plastic explosive.
At that time, no one else who was initiated, shall we say, could get so close to Hitler. No one except Stauffenberg.
An acid detonator with a time delay fuse. The success of the coup depends on a disabled war veteran with 3 fingers.
There was a huge risk in this, of course. He had to actually physically assassinate Hitler, but at the same time he had to go back to Berlin and organize the coup, the operation which was going to create a new regime.
Leave-taking from the family in Bamberg. How much could he tell his wife?
She didn't know that he was going to carry out the assassination himself, but she knew perfectly well that he was involved. And they discussed it.
But there are some questions she doesn't want to ask her husband.
She trusted him implicitly. She believed that he would only do what was right, even if her own life was at risk. She asked him, what are the chances? He said 50-50. It was agreed. You must pretend to know nothing. One of us must be here for the children.
1944. This is the day. The place, Hitler's residence in the Alps. The Berghof. These pictures are from the beginning of the war. With the explosives in his bags, Stauffenberg travels to his appointment with Hitler. But SS Chief Heinrich Himmler and Hermann Göring are not at the meeting. Stauffenberg does not plant the bomb. 4 days later, the Allies have fought their way off the Normandy beaches. Germany's defeat is only a matter of time. The Allies are advancing on 3 fronts, from the west, the south, and the east. Stauffenberg once again prepares to kill Hitler, this time at the Führer's headquarters in East Prussia. The Wolf's Lair. A memorable photo is taken on this 15th of July, 1944. Stauffenberg, controlled and calm. Nothing reveals his intentions. But at the last moment, Stauffenberg's co-conspirators call it off.
Stauffenberg gone there to do it and failed, and I think that made him even more determined when the next opportunity came that he would not fail this time. He would do it whatever happened.
The evening of the 19th of July. The next day, Stauffenberg will have another chance.
It is time. Something must be done. Anyone who dares to act must accept that he will surely go down in German history as a traitor. But if he fails to act, he would be a traitor to his own conscience.
He went to confession before the assassination attempt. If you know that you're not only killing the tyrant, the man who must die, but are also dragging more or less innocent people to their deaths, that certainly can't have been easy for him. He couldn't have just shrugged it off.
It's a terrible burden to bear. The need to kill the few to save the many.
The number of war dead would have been approximately half as high as it finally was. And the cities that were destroyed after the 20th July would not have been destroyed.
Thursday, 20th of July, 1944. Stauffenberg has 2 kilos of explosives in his attaché case. Takeoff from Berlin's Rangsdorf airfield. First Lieutenant Werner von Haften is on Stauffenberg's staff. He's involved in the plot. Stauffenberg cannot be certain what the consequences of an assassination will be, nor how the Allies will respond to Hitler's death. Stauffenberg is determined. The tyrant must die.
It wasn't as though anyone could walk up to Hitler and take a pot shot at him. That wasn't possible. There were a series of security zones, and access to Hitler was limited to a very small number of people.
It's 8 kilometers from Rastenburg airfield to the Wolf's Lair. Stauffenberg has the highest security clearance at Hitler's headquarters. The road to the inner sanctum passes through 3 security zones, each patrolled by armed guards. At about 10:30 a.m., Stauffenberg reaches the officers' mess in Zone 2. He decides to have a bite of breakfast. Haften isn't hungry. They will meet later. Reserve Lieutenant Christoph Scheibler accompanies Stauffenberg after his arrival.
It was a really friendly, happy breakfast. Looking at Stauffenberg, you could never have guessed he was tense. He could hide it completely. I really admired that afterwards. He was so badly wounded that he needed help with his case. He couldn't carry his case on his own. Everyone helped him. And I asked him, why is it all so heavy? And he said, I've so much to do. Perfectly quietly and factually.
But then Field Marshal Keitel delivers a shock. Hitler's Italian ally Mussolini is expected that afternoon. The briefing will take place half an hour earlier, at 12:30. Stauffenberg is out of time. He needs to prime the explosives and activate the fuse. He warns Haften. Stauffenberg asks for a room where he can change his shirt. The briefing room is prepared for the meeting. Haften and Stauffenberg have to prime 2 explosive packages with acid fuses. It's delicate work. The first fuse is activated and checked. The calculation is that no one in this room will survive. A sergeant is sent to fetch Stauffenberg. The others are waiting.
Beeilen Sie sich bitte.
Their time is up. And Stauffenberg has only armed one of the charges. This is how the bomb is meant to function. Acid will spill out of the broken ampule and eat through the wire holding back the spring with the detonator bolt. After approximately 15 minutes, the bomb will explode. But there is just 1 kilogram of explosives instead of 2.
Darf ich Ihre Tasche packen?
Es geht schon.
Kurt Salterberg is on guard outside the briefing room in the highest security zone.
We had been told only to do an identity check.
not to search bags or look for weapons. He could have had a machine gun slung on his back. I would have let him through.
At 12:30, Stauffenberg enters the briefing room. Field Marshal Keitel informs Hitler that Stauffenberg has arrived and will report on the movements of the Emergency Deployment Division. Stauffenberg is aware that in the summer heat, the bomb could go off minutes earlier than expected. He makes sure the bomb is close to Hitler. Then he makes an excuse and leaves the briefing. The case is moved to the far side of the table leg.
After about maybe 10 minutes, Stauffenberg came back. I noticed he wasn't wearing his cap or his belt, and I assumed, as often happened, that he was going to the bunker to fetch a file of some kind. There was nothing unusual in that.
Erich Kretz is a driver at the Wolf's Lair. He's been given orders to pick up Stauffenberg.
I got changed quickly and drove to security cell in 1A. And I'd only just drawn up when he sort of came out of the bushes. Lieutenant Haften. He came up to me and asked if this was Stauffenberg's car. I said yes. I saluted and said, request permission to point out to the colonel that he is not dressed according to regulations. And then, of course, he said, that's none of your business. Drive.
20th of July, 1944, 12:42 p.m.
All the paper, everything was flying around, splinters of wood from the windows. I ran straight to the telephone and raised the alarm. At that moment, Stauffenberg came by in the staff car.
12:44 p.m. Stauffenberg's escape route leads past the briefing hut.
Wounded men were streaming out, groaning and screaming with pain.
Stauffenberg is absolutely certain. Hitler is dead. This is the hut after the explosion. Some of the blast pressure escaped through the open windows. If Stauffenberg had kept the second charge in the case, everyone in the room would have been killed, including Hitler. The heavy table leg diverted the explosion. Of the 24 men in the room, 10 were badly wounded. 4 died. Hitler was lucky. In his certain knowledge that Hitler is dead, Stauffenberg heads to Berlin. He now has to direct the coup d'etat. He will be out of contact with the conspirators for more than 2 hours. Every minute counts. By the time they touch down in Berlin, he expects that the coup will be underway. He's wrong. Crucial hours have been wasted. The Bendler block in Berlin, headquarters of the Reserve Army. Only now is the order given to unleash Operation Valkyrie. The coup begins with the words, "The Führer is dead." The 21-year-old conspirator Ewald von Kleist is in the Bendler block. He's the last eyewitness to the day's events.
Valkyrie had not been set in motion when he got there. It seemed to me he was pretty annoyed about that.
Valkyrie finally gets underway. It calls for the reserve army to occupy all Nazi positions of power in Berlin and the Reich. First signs are hopeful. An army unit is reported on its way to take over Berlin's SS barracks. Valkyrie's troops must now seal off the government district. Stauffenberg gives orders to occupy the radio stations and news agencies.
He was the absolute central figure. He had character, and he had an astonishing presence and perseverance. He didn't allow himself a moment's doubt. He was masterful.
But then a message arrives from the Wolf's Lair. Hitler is alive. Following the murderous attack on the Führer, army generals are attempting a coup, which must be suppressed at all costs. Stauffenberg dismisses it as a lie.
Wenn Sie Keitel wären, würden Sie dann zugeben, dass Hitler tot ist?
Of course, the Nazis will pretend Hitler is alive.
I was sent out to check if the government district had been surrounded and the guards had been disarmed. That was a high point for me when I saw Adolf Hitler's SS guard disarmed on Hermann Göringstrasse. That was a very good sight to see.
But Valkyrie has failed to close down Berlin's main broadcasting station.
Wir geben Nachrichten des drahtlosen Dienstes. Auf den Führer wurde heute ein Sprengstoffanschlag verübt. Der Führer selbst hat außer leichten Verbrennungen und Prellungen keine Verletzungen erlitten. Er hat unverzüglich daraus seine Arbeit wieder aufgenommen und wie vorgesehen den Duce zu einer längeren Aussprache empfangen.
In Berlin, the conspirators have sent troops to a crucial target, the villa of Joseph Goebbels. Major Ernst Rehmer, commander of the Berlin Guard Battalion, at first carries out the Valkyrie orders. Then he becomes suspicious. He tells Goebbels there's been an attempt on the life of the Führer. Goebbels puts in a call to the Wolf's Lair. A switchboard operator is listening in.
Goebbels briefly described what was going on in Berlin, and then he said, I have Major Rehmer here. He has orders to arrest me and to seal off the whole government district. I have persuaded him that you're still alive. And then Goebbels said, can I put Major Rehmer on? And Hitler said, Rehmer, do you recognize my voice?
Ich erkenne Ihre Stimme, mein Führer.
A turning point for the coup.
I hereby order you to crush any resistance with force and to liquidate immediately anyone who is not entirely loyal to me. Is that understood?
Haben Sie mich verstanden? Jawohl.
Rehmer obeys his orders and immediately lifts the cordon round the government district. His Guard battalion now secures the government district against the Valkyrie troops and moves in on the Bendler block. Now events move very quickly.
Zentrale. Wir müssen hier raus.
They hurriedly gather up the files. Stauffenberg is shot in his left arm. But he won't give in. He calls Paris, one of the cities where the coup has partly succeeded.
Öffnen Sie.
He tells them it's over. In the courtyard of the Bendler block, a firing squad is drawn up. Four conspirators: General Friedrich Albrecht, Colonel Merz von Quirnheim, First Lieutenant Werner von Haften, Colonel Klaus Schenk, Graf von Stauffenberg.
One of my mates was told to position his truck with the headlights pointing at the walls. None of us, the lieutenant and I, had no idea what was going on. Till someone told us they're going to shoot some people. When you're so close to a person as I was to the Count, he treated me with so much understanding and warmth. I don't know what you think. The soul is sick. It suffers. Then he was shot.
An meiner rechten Seite. Ja, eine Reihe von mir tollen Mitarbeitern sehr verletzt. Einer ist gestorben. Ich selbst bin völlig unverletzt.
On the 21st of July, Nina von Stauffenberg learns of her husband's death.
Meine Mutter hat erzählt, dass es eben...
My mother told me that she gathered the children round after lunch.
Mittagessen zu sich gerufen hat und ihnen mitgeteilt hat,
and told them that Daddy had been shot.
Der Papi erschossen worden ist.
Ich habe eine schlimme Nachricht.
She told the children that she had bad news.
Auf den Führer ist...
An attempt had been made on the life of the Führer. It was their father. She told them he had made a mistake.
Darauf waren wir natürlich völlig fassungslos.
Well, of course, we were completely stunned. My younger brother, who was particularly close to my father, couldn't stop crying, and I couldn't understand it at all.
Und ich war auch, was du konntest auf den Führer.
And then my mother said, well, he believed he had to do it for Germany.
Hat gemeint, müsste das für Deutschland tun.
Die Vorsehung schützte unseren geliebten Führer.
Die Vorsehung schützte uns.
Providence protected our dear Führer.
Das hat sie den Kindern so gesagt.
She said that to protect the children, so that if there were questions,
falls die Kinder doch befragt werden,
they would have a phrase to repeat.
Dass sie das genauso wiedergeben.
Of course, we were completely confused. And then she told us that she was pregnant. And that night, they took her away.
The Gestapo searched the house for information about other conspirators. Nina von Stauffenberg is arrested. Her fifth child, Constanze, is born in prison.
I'm sure she was afraid she would be executed. And then, of course, her great fear was the children. Would she see her children again?
They're taken to a Nazi children's home to be re-educated.
When my mother was arrested, it was heads down and don't look right or left, but just make sure you make it through.
The children are indoctrinated. Your father is a traitor. But their love was stronger than the fury of the regime.
I think we have to accept events as they are. He stays in our memory as he was when he died. And perhaps that's a comfort to us, and it's right that way.
What was the meaning of Stauffenberg's deed?
It certainly showed that not all Germans were rigid Nazis and supported the regime. There were people in Germany who had a conscience.
The war continued. Millions died. The regime claimed hundreds of thousands of victims behind the lines. More than 100 towns and cities were destroyed. Stauffenberg had meant to stop all that. If he had succeeded with his plan. Nina wrote down her feelings for Klaus in the darkest days of her life at Ravensbrück concentration camp.
You are with me here. Your body is no more. Around me, I can feel your arms embrace endure. Your eyes shine into mine, in wakefulness and dream. Your mouth comes close to mine. Your whispers fill the room. My dearest child, be strong. You are my heir. Wherever you may be sure I am there. She wasn't the sort to write poetry. I don't know of any others she wrote. And I said, Mommy, that poem's really lovely. I had no idea you could do that. And she said, I think Daddy was guiding my hand.
All the family survived. After the end of the war, they were reunited. The family of a man who gave his life for his belief in a better Germany.